Starting off this list, in our number 10 spot we have Cleopatra and Ptolemy VIII. We'll head over to 47 BC, at a time where ancient Egypt was a little different. We often think of Cleopatra's end, but the beginning of her life was quite hectic as well, even for the royal family. Cleopatra had two younger brothers who both ruled with her after the death of their father, Ptolemy XII. Ptolemy XIII initially ruled with Cleopatra, they were a historical duo, but they soon became rivals. Ptolemy wanted the throne to himself, so he attempted to seize control of Egypt. This led to a civil war in which Cleopatra was exiled. However, after Caesar defeated Ptolemy's army and restored Cleopatra to the throne, Ptolemy XIII drowned in the Nile River while attempting to flee a battle. Talk about family drama. I thought mine was bad, but dang. In our number 9 spot today we have King Henry VIII. Henry's marriages were significant in the history of England because they played a major role in the English Reformation and the establishment of the Church of England as a separate entity from the Catholic Church. Yeah, a few of those family scandals ought to do it. Catherine of Aragon, Henry's first wife, he quickly divorced after she failed to produce a male heir. Anne Boleyn, Henry's second wife, who he of course married immediately after his divorce from Catherine, a little sketchy, well, she was later accused of adultery and treason and lost her head. It wasn't good. Jane Seymour, Henry's third wife, gave him this long-awaited male heir, Edward VI. Sadly, she died soon after giving birth. Next was Anne, Henry's fourth wife, whom he married for political reasons but found unattractive and divorced shortly after. He saw a painting of her before and she didn't match the image. Swear to God that's what happened. Like, what in the Tinder? This guy is absolutely insane. Next was Catherine Howard, Henry's fifth wife, who was only 17 at the time. She was accused of adultery and also lost her life. Catherine Parr, Henry's sixth and final wife, survived him for a change and went on to marry again after his death. Divorced, beheaded, died. Divorced, beheaded, survived, alright? Study that for your history test.
Time to take life insurance policies out. We're meeting the Castro Angel Landing family. Cult. You know there had to be at least one coming up. They love to call themselves families after all. Angel's Landing is the name of a 20-acre compound outside of Wichita, Kansas, where Lou Castro and a small group of people lived an inexplicably extravagant life in the early 2000s. His followers were convinced he was an angel seer who saw the future and knew how people were gonna die. Turns out the reason he knew was because he was gonna be the one making it happen. Patricia Hughes showed up dead in 2003 and police turned their attention to the secluded luxury compound. There were high-end vehicles and appliances, well-kept lavish homes, pools, and just a lot of wealth that wasn't accounted for or could be explained. Then Patricia's husband dies in 2006 on compound once again by a freak accident, and Ron Goodwin dived into every bit of personal and financial information he could find on the people living at Angel's Landing. Turns out our buddy Castro took out expensive life insurance policies on certain cult members and had them cashed in by other members when someone in the makeshift family accidentally died. This pattern occurred around every 2 years and for about a decade unnoticed. Turns out his name wasn't even Lou Castro, but Daniel Perez, a man from Texas with many police reports. Perez was charged with 28 felonies, and in February 2015 he was convicted on all counts and sentenced to 80 years in prison. The cult was later profiled on an episode of Oxygen's Deadly Cult.
In our number 7 spot today we have King James I. We're taking it back to Scotland in 1425. King James I ordered the death of a powerful nobleman who just also happened to be James' cousin. Murdoch Stewart, Duke of Albany, was the grandson of King Robert II and had served as regent for James while he was imprisoned in England. However, once James returned to Scotland, he suspected Murdoch of plotting against him. Murdoch and several of his followers were arrested and killed in Stirling Castle. King James' actions were seen as a ruthless demonstration of his power and authority, and he faced quite a bit of criticism for this harsh treatment. In our number 6 spot today we have John the Fearless. In 1407, Duke of Burgundy John the Fearless ordered the death of Duke of Orleans Louis I, aka John's cousin. A lot of cousin rivalries in this list. At the time, of course, he was his political rival in the French court, but what is happening? The two men were powerful and influential members of the French nobility, and their feud had been building for quite some time. See, John believed that Louis was a threat to his power, and he had also insulted him publicly, which for sure doesn't help the case. Louis was ambushed and killed by a group of armed men in the streets of Paris. John was heavily criticized for his actions, and the incident even went as far as to spark a civil war in France. The conflict lasted for several years and resulted in political instability and, sadly, lots of lives lost in France. In our number 5 spot today we have the brutal Benders, also known as the Bloody Benders. If their name didn't hint towards it, they were a family of who operated in Labette County, Kansas in the late 19th century. The family consisted of John Bender, his wife Elvira, and their adult children Kate and John Jr. They ran a small inn and a general store that became a popular stop for travelers passing through the area. However, the family was also known to rob and/or kill their guests. Just a minor inconvenience if you want to stop in at the inn. They would lure travelers into their home, act friendly, and then completely switch on them. The family's crimes were eventually discovered in 1873, but they fled the area before they could be brought to justice. Lovely. What year was this again? I don't think they're alive anymore, thank God. Well, who knows. In our number 4 spot today we have Fred and Rose West. We've heard of Bonnie and Clyde, but what about Fred and Rose West? Ugh. The two were a married couple who committed a series of brutal killings in England during the 1970s and 80s. Their victims were usually women, and they buried their bodies in and around their home. The couple was thankfully arrested in 1994 after police discovered the remains of several victims. While awaiting trial, Fred took his own life in prison. Rose was found guilty of killing 10 people and was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. Definitely one of the worst when it comes to British criminal history. In our number 3 spot today we have the KRAY twins. Ronnie and Reginald KRAY. Where do I even begin here? On paper, these twins were lavish, they had very bubbly personalities, and were often associated with celebrities and politicians. Deep down, these British gangsters were much, much more. The KRAY twins operated in London's East End during the 1950s and 1960s. They were involved in organized crime like protection rackets, arson, and they took a handful of lives. They were eventually arrested and sentenced to life in 1969 for killing Jack McVitie and George Cornell. The KRAY's legacy has been depicted in many films, books, and documentaries, and they remain among the most notorious figures in British criminal history. In our number 2 spot today we have no touching. There is a rule that you just cannot touch a royal. I'm sure there's a multitude of reasons for this, mostly to do with security, but aside from a very lucky handshake, you really are supposed to keep your distance. I suppose it's because I live the life of a regular person, but I kind of feel like in some ways this might be a little sad. I feel like you might be lacking in so much connection with a ton of interesting people, and like some of the people that you meet, wouldn't you just be dying to hug them? You know, apparently this is part of the reason why the Queen always wore gloves. She of course shook a lot of hands while making her royal appearances, and the same will likely go for the new king. Maybe he'll take up gloves as a fashion accessory, just like his mother. And finally, in our number 1 spot today we have the church. We talked about the armed forces, and King Charles won't only be the head of the armed forces, but he will also become the head of the church in England. Quite a jump from talking about war and being the one who makes those kinds of decisions to being the head of the church, where things hopefully are quite the opposite. This is a post that British monarchs have held since the church was founded by King Henry VIII in the 1500s, and it appears as though the tradition will carry on. In this role, it means that King Charles will be responsible for appointing archbishops and bishops to their role. The king will of course be advised in this role by the Prime Minister, and it is said that the king is religious in his own right and that he has already spoken about how his personal faith has informed his approach to leadership. Starting off this list in our number 10 spot we have the Murdaughs. With the high profile of this ongoing case, coupled with the fact that Netflix just released a chilling documentary about the story of this family, it is likely that you may already have quite the idea of who the Murdaugh family is. Taylor and I have been watching the documentary series. We're past the first few episodes, and man is this story wild. A few years ago, if someone asked you who the Murdaugh family was, you would have likely described them as one of the most powerful families in South Carolina, with a legal dynasty that has spanned for a century. Now, if I asked you that same question, the answer would be a family who had it all. Money, money, power, status, but some of the members flew a little too close to the sun, tragedy ensued, and now people have lost their lives and the family has been destroyed. It started back in 2015 with the death of Stephen Smith. It carries on to 2018 when Gloria Satterfield, a long-serving employee for the family, was found passed away after a quote trip and fall accident. These events are both horrible and completely atrocious, but despite the rumors, mysteries, and alleged conspirators of these deaths, things really started to unravel for the family in February of 2019 with the death of Mallory Beach. The young woman met her untimely fate after a boating accident where, allegedly, 19-year-old Paul Murdaugh was at the wheel, intoxicated. We could spend hours and hours talking about this family and all of these cases and the conspiracies, but we're short for time, which brings me right to the most recent tragedy. The 2021 killings of that same Murdaugh who was driving the boat, as well as the killing of his mother, Margaret. Now, I do believe that people are innocent until proven guilty, but it is important to note that the one on trial for these killings right now is the father and husband to the deceased, Alex Murdaugh, the patriarch of the family who is supposed to be carrying on that Murdaugh legacy. The stories surrounding this family are horrific, tragic, and a reminder of the dangers that money and power can bring. In our number 9 spot today we have the Sacklers. This family is the one behind the dynasty of Purdue Pharma, who is best known for producing an exceptionally strong prescription painkiller. Of course, we all know just how big and rich a pharmaceutical company could get, especially one that has been around for quite some time. The company was first created in 1952 by 3 Brooklyn-born brothers, and in the beginning, the company mostly dealt in things like laxatives and earwax removal methods. Soon, things for the company took quite an upwards turn, and before anyone knew it, the family was regarded as one of the most esteemed New York families, but they were also known for their philanthropic tendencies, with their names on museums and hospitals, some of the most famous in the world. You see, the thing is, when they released this painkiller in 1995, it led to them amassing an insane $13 billion fortune. That is obviously incredible, but the trouble came when it was realized that this painkiller wasn't nearly as potent as it was marketed to be, and frequent users would be building up a tolerance to it, meaning they needed to use higher and higher dosages. Viewer, welcome to the opioid crisis. Basically, this all spiraled out of control and led to many lawsuits coming against Purdue Pharma, not only by individuals, but by January 2019, 36 states were suing the company for what the painkiller had done to their citizens. After 2 years of deliberations, the Sacklers finally reached a deal with plaintiffs in bankruptcy court in September of 2021. As part of their Chapter 11 proposal, they agreed to pay $4.5 billion and give up all ownership of the company in exchange for complete immunity and all future opioid liability. Despite this fall from grace, the Sacklers were able to move an alleged $1.36 billion into offshore accounts, so despite their bankruptcy filing and the large sum of money handed over, they will continue to retain quite a large amount of their personal wealth. In our number 8 spot today we have the Bakkers. Jim and Tammy Faye Bakker were once the most famous televangelists in America, and they certainly were living in quite a lap of luxury. They had beautiful homes, expensive cars, and a ton of money, but that quickly came crashing down amid horrendous scandal. In the late 1980s, after much success, Jim Bakker resigned from the PTL ministry after there was a cover-up to hide some hush money that had been given to church secretary Jessica Hahn over an alleged SA situation. Of course, not necessarily a surprise, but definitely not a good look for a televangelist. This led to more interest in people looking into the family more, and soon it was uncovered that there was some sort of accounting fraud going on as well. The consequences for this came by way of felony charges, conviction, imprisonment, and divorce. That was the end of that legacy, but since serving his time, Jim Bakker hasn't exactly slowed down. He not only remarried and returned to televangelism, but he also currently hosts the Jim Bakker Show, which focuses on the end times and the second coming of Christ while promoting emergency survival products. So that's interesting. In our number 7 spot today we have Prince Sado. Born in 1735, Prince Sado was the heir to the Korean throne, but unfortunately he would go on to suffer from extreme mental illness and delusions. Thankfully for historians and those of us interested in history, the wife of the prince created memoirs, and in them she detailed the horrifying things that happened next. The prince began to kill, He began to hurt and torment people. He basically turned their home into a house of horrors. The prince also endured some pretty horrific treatment from his own father, which of course is not an excuse for the things he did, but it definitely did not help the scenario. Eventually, the family had enough and realized that his behavior would go on to ruin the name of their family forever, so something needed to be done. At the time, tradition stated that if the prince were to be executed, his wife and child would also need to be, but everyone thought that maybe that was a bit too far. Why should they have to pay for his crimes? This led to the king coming up with quite the bizarre workaround for this. On a hot day in July, the king forced the prince to step into a rice chest, which was then locked behind him. This acted as a way to make it seem like he had caused his own death, which is said to have occurred just a few days later. In our number 6 spot today, we have the Walton family. The Walton family is one of the wealthiest families in the world and is best known for founding and owning the retail giant Walmart. This family is headed by siblings Jim, Alice, and Rob Walton, who inherited their fortune from their father Sam Walton, who initially founded Walmart in 1962. Sam Walton began his career in retail with a single store in Arkansas, and over the years he and his family grew Walmart into the largest retailer in the entire world, with thousands of stores in the United States and all around the world. Today, Walmart is a Fortune 500 company and one of the largest employers in the world, with over 2 million employees. The Walton family's net worth is estimated to be around $230 billion, making them one of the wealthiest families in the world. In addition to their stake in Walmart, the family also has investments in other businesses and ventures, and throughout the years it's been, the company receives both praise for their practices, but more often than not are met with criticism for much of the questionable and shady dealings. In our number 5 spot today, we have Prince John. It is said that this may be one of the darkest secrets of the British royal family. Prince John would have been the uncle of Queen Elizabeth II, but he passed before she was born. Prince John was the 6th child of King George V and Queen Mary, and it is said that he suffered from seizures, likely as a result of epilepsy, although it's hard to diagnose for certain because of all of the secrecies surrounding him and his illness. From the age of 4, when he had his first seizure, until his untimely and very early death, Prince John lived in a separate estate where he was cared for by a governess. Many people have since criticized the royal family, calling their treatment of Prince John as callous or inhumane, like they were hiding him away for being ill. Of course, the palace was concerned with the monarchy's public image, and there was a belief at the time that royals shouldn't have any physical or mental ailments, although that is of course impossible. They also didn't include him in public events, which could have been another image thing, and also perhaps because of a worry that he might have a seizure at one of these events. At the end of the day, it was definitely a different time, but the idea of excluding him because he was ill truly is a really sad thought. In our number 4 spot today, we have Marguerite and Blanche of Burgundy. This is a royal scandal that took place all the way back in 1314, and it starts off with the daughters-in-law of King Philip IV of France. I think that's the 4th, here's hoping. These young women, Marguerite and Blanche of Burgundy, were accused of having quite a scandalous affair with 2 brothers, Philippe and Gautier. So this already is some hot tea, but apparently when Queen Isabella of England, who is the daughter of King Philip of France, so I guess like sisters-in-law with these ladies, when she heard these stories, apparently she's the one who totally outed their affairs. It was obviously a huge deal, and both of the women admitted to their adultery. This led to them being pretty much erased from public knowledge. They had their hair cut short and they were thrown in a dungeon, and even though Marguerite was meant to be the Queen of France through her marriage, when her husband ascended the throne, she stayed locked in the dungeon until the marriage could be annulled. Little is known about what happened to either of them after this point. However, it is believed that Marguerite passed away in 1315 and Blanche 1326. As for the men in this affair, well, they met quite a gruesome fate that involved the removal of their bits and pieces before their swift execution. In our number 3 spot today, we have the Duggars. Alright, one of the most famous reality TV families, and even before the horrors of this family came to light, they were already a family that had fame due to quite a strange reason. If you're unfamiliar with who the Duggars are, you might be more familiar with the show that they used to have on TLC titled 19 Kids and Counting. Yeah, the show ran on TLC for 7 years until it was cancelled in 2015, and the show featured, well, The Duggar family. The family consisted of parents Jim Bob and Michele Duggar and their 19 children, 9 daughters and 10 sons, all of whose names begin with the letter J. It was an interesting time, and they seemed like this huge, happy, religious family, but in the years since the cancellation of the show, some horrifying things came to light. Initially, the reason that TLC suspended and then subsequently cancelled the show is because it came to light that the eldest son in the family, Josh, had done some horrible things and acted violently, horrendously, and inexcusably against a number of girls, even some in his own family. Due to the popularity of the show before these serious stories came to light, there was a spin-off show that was created titled Counting On. This show first aired in December 2015 and stayed on the air for a surprising number of years before it was pulled, and the family yet again found themselves in the center of a scandal that had to do with Josh. This time he was caught in possession of a certain kind of tape that no one should have, and that should not even exist at all. I can't say which kind of tape, but just know it's the worst of the worst. These are, of course, some of the worst scandals that have surrounded the family, but truly, it's only a drop in the bucket of the many stories surrounding them. In our number 2 spot today, we have King Juan Carlos. The former King Juan Carlos of Spain, when he first ascended the throne in 1975, was highly looked upon. He was said to be bringing a new age for the country, an age of democracy. His reign lasted for quite a while, but by the time 2014 rolled around, he was forced to abdicate the throne. This was due to a few reasons. Firstly, his public ratings started to plummet after word spread of him being a bit of a womanizer and after an explosive affair, but also because of a lavish elephant hunting trip he took in the middle of an economic collapse. Okay? Fair enough, I can see why people were getting their guard up a bit. So the king abdicated the throne in favor of his son Philippe, who sits on it to this day. During this time, however, the scandals in the family weren't only to do with Juan Carlos. In January of 2014, another of his children, his daughter Infanta Cristina, was charged with tax fraud. She has since been acquitted, that happened in 2017, but she was stripped of her title as the Duchess of Palma de Mallorca, and this whole deal had her leaving Spain and moving to Switzerland. The drama doesn't end here, however, because her husband actually was convicted in the case with charges that included embezzlement, fraud, and tax evasion, and he received prison time in 2018. In the end, none of the fraud charges have ever been linked back to the former king, but this entire debacle did cause the former ruler to move out of Spain. With his move came a letter, part of which read, quote, "Guided by the conviction to perform the best service to the Spanish people, their institutions, and you as king, I am communicating my thoughtful decision to move at this time outside of Spain. A decision I make with sadness, but with great serenity. I have been king of Spain for almost 40 years, and during all of them I have always wanted the best for Spain and for the crown." Finally, in our number 1 spot today, we have the Soros family. This family is perhaps best known for its patriarch, George Soros, who is a billionaire investor. Born in Hungary in 1930 and surviving through the atrocities of the Second World War, George would later become a very successful investor, earning his fortune through his hedge fund, Soros Fund Management. It is said that George and his success could largely be attributed to a very famous moment in history. On September 16, 1992, George helped his fund bring in $1 billion in a single day, and he did this by short selling the British pound. This day would go on to become known as Black Wednesday, and went on to solidify him being known as, quote, "the man who broke the Bank of England." Today, his family, which includes his children, is among the most powerful families in the world due to their active geopolitical actions. Their influence and interest extends beyond the financial sector, as they are also heavily active in politics as well.
So to start, it's Genghis Khan. That's probably the most obvious start in this case. Good old Genghis was the ruler and emperor of the Mongol Empire, the largest empire in history. How'd he do that? Well, even if they were outnumbered, which they usually were, the Mongols were masters of tactical and psychological warfare. They always had one-time offer for any city or civilization they came across. If this people in the town surrendered, the Mongols would treat them well and allow them the fruits of a secure world. They had considerable personal liberty, religious freedoms, and overall more rights. Once the Mongols were in power, their land was safe and well controlled. If, however, the people resisted the Mongol advance, they and their cities would feel the full fury of the enraged invaders. The Mongols were violent, decapitating a path from the west shores of the Black Sea to the Pacific. Some experts calculate that fully 11% of the world's population died because of the Mongol expansion. He died in 1227 himself after defeating the Tanguts, and he left his successor and sons to handle everything. Don't think they're any better, however. His grandson told the Pope that he'd only protect Christian pilgrimage to Jerusalem if the Pope brought every king of Christendom to Khan to swear fealty. And his son committed one of the worst Mongol atrocities recorded against the Oryats. So I could go on, but we got more freaks to talk about. Your takeaway is don't mess with a Mongol. Ed Hardy fans, you'll know this one, the KRAYS. Dramatized in the 2015 movie Legends, these identical twins are unique in comparison to other criminal empire leaders. They ruled East End London with an iron fist during the swingin' 60s. Their criminal empire depended on robbery and protection rackets to thrive. The KRAYS and their associates would ensure compliance by readily resorting to arson, assault, and killings. The fear they inspired stopped even the most cowardly of snitches from saying a peep. They operated out of a nightclub and they were familiar figures on the street, but the streets are different during the day and, surprising to many, ordinary people who were untouched by the KRAY's business interests actually revered them. They acted as a sort of local authority, helping people with their problems, debts, hurtful spouses, or failing homes. They guaranteed safety on the street and delivered it. It wasn't even just the ordinary people that admired the KRAY brothers, but celebrities and politicians too. The police arrested them in 1968 after Ronnie's mental decline, caused by his refusal to take medication, led to the operation to make some sloppy mistakes. AKA he literally killed 2 people at separate public events. 2 occasions, guys. Ronnie was sent to a high security psychiatric facility due to his instability but also his homosexuality. Unfortunately, that's how the times were. He died in 1995 while his brother died in 2000, 5 weeks after authorities released him from prison on a compassion ground for his terminal cancer. This Spanish family has lurid tales, but are they fact or are they fiction? The Borgias. Originally from Spain, the family became important in 15th century political and religious world. Caesar, the Borgias patriarch's father, was elected pope in 1492 of the titular church of Santa Maria Nova, making Caesar the archbishop and later the cardinal in 1492. Caesar, however, had no interest in religious vocation. He was better known at the papal court for his hunting parties and amorous liaisons and flashy clothes, rather than meticulous religious observations. On the death of Pedro Luis in 1488, the title of Duke of Granda had been handed past him and gone to his younger brother Juan. When Juan was mysteriously murdered in 1497, the rumor gradually spread that Caesar was the culprit. Ambitious and hungry for yet more power, the family included 2 popes, one of which was Alexander, the father of the famous Lucrezia. Her family was perfectly happy to use her as a pawn in their power plays. She entered into several arranged marriages, each one helped the Borgias extend their grip. She's also what inspired the belief that they really kept it in the family. After retiring to Naples after being a professional wife, Giovanni, dubbed the Roman infant, is seen at approximately age 3 for the first time. 2 papal bulls recognized the child as an illegitimate son of first Caesar, her uncle, and then of Alexander, her dad, who probably was the true father. The mysterious origin of the child, as well as her presence at a celebrated night group romp in the Vatican, has been used to support the rumors. You can learn more about this disastrous family in a 3-season TV drama literally named after them, the Borgias.
In our number 8 spot today, we have Julia the Elder. Julia Caesaris was the only biological child of Roman Emperor Augustus. She was born in 39 BC and was married to Marcus Claudius Marcellus, but later got caught up in a series of scandals that brought shame to her family. So much so that her father actually exiled her to a small island off of the coast of Italy in 2 BC. She remained in exile for several years and her marriage to Marcellus was annulled. In 280, Augustus allowed her to return back to the mainland, but she was still considered an outcast and was forced to live in seclusion for the rest of her life. This was less than 10 years after her mother had suffered the same fate. What an absolute nightmare.
Next up is Lucky Luciano. We love a fun and flirty nickname, one he earned for success at evading arrest and winning craps games. Lucky was the most powerful chief of American organized crime in the early 1930s and a major influence even from prison and after deportation to Italy. At 10, he was already involved in muggings, shoplifting, extortion. After a 6-month jail sentence when he was a teen, Lucky teamed up with Frank Costello and Mayor Lansky and other young gangs, and later New York's rising crime boss Joe Masseria, who he becomes second-hand man to. In October of 1929, he becomes the rare survivor of a one-way ride when he's abducted by 4 men in a car, beaten, stabbed, had his throat slit from ear to ear, and was left for dead. but he survived and never named his abductors Metal. Lucky had carefully nurtured his contacts with the young powers and had become the boss of all bosses without ever accepting or claiming the title. By 1934, he and the leaders of other crime families had developed the National Crime Syndicate. In 1936, Lucky was indicted, tried, and convicted for his brothels and call girl empire, and was sentenced to Clinton prison for a 30 to 50 year term. From his cell, he continued to rule and issue orders, and in 1942, the luxury liner Normandy was destroyed in the New York harbor, and Navy intelligence sought Luciano's help in tightening waterfront security. Lucky gave the orders, and sabotage on the docks ended, and in 1946 his sentence was commuted and he was deported to Italy, where he settled in Rome. He then bounced from Cuba to Naples and continued his crime empire until he died of a heart attack in an airport in Naples, Florida in 1962. A family gang of four so ferocious they have a catchy nickname to prove it: the Benders. The Benders settled in isolated Labette County, Kansas in the early 1870s following the New Spiritualism movement. This is because Kate, in her early 20s, was renowned for performing seances that showed off her psychic abilities at the store inn that the family ran. But this wasn't as picturesque as it seems. Historians are very confident that the Benders, living as a husband, wife, young adult son, young adult daughter dynamic, actually weren't even related, and none of them were even named Bender. And while it'd be no biggie if it wasn't for the fact so many people who happened to pass through Labette County never made it to their final destinations, including a well-known local doctor, William York. After a community meeting about York, attended by both of the male Benders, it resulted in a search party formation, and it was soon noted that the Bender homestead appeared recently abandoned and full of evidence. Near the table where the guests were served was a trap door, and the foul-smelling hole beneath the door was just full of blood and gross stuff. The ground in an orchard nearby the house has been carefully plowed, but one small section was noticeably indented. The ground was dug up and revealed the decomposed body of Mr. York. 8 more bodies are found, skulls crushed, throats cut. Guests at the inn were urged to sit at the place of honor, which was a curtain dividing the house's rooms. While dining, the guest of honor would be hit in the head with a hammer from behind the curtain, his throat cut, and then his body dropped in the trap door to the cellar, Sweeney Todd style. Their motive, robbery, or the thrill of it, nobody actually knows, because despite a reward and several substantial claims of their capture at the hands of various posses, the Benders appear to have gotten away with it, and their grim story continues to intrigue.
In our number 4 spot today, we have the rules of the road. Okay, this rule or tradition or law, I guess, is probably one of the craziest things I've ever heard, but I guess it's been around for quite a while and I just had no idea. As it turns out, the monarch is the only person in the UK who is allowed to drive without a legal license or even license plates. That's insane. I didn't expect the king to have to take a driver's test like everyone else, but just having a rule that allows them, if they chose to drive without any idea how? It's pretty bizarre. The good news is though, which makes this rule make a lot more sense, is that of course, rather than driving himself, King Charles' chauffeur will be much more responsible for most of the driving for the king. Let's just hope the chauffeur has their driver's license. I'm not gonna lie, there's this silly photo of the queen, and every time I think about the monarch driving without a license, I just think of this little photo. She's got a little silly grin on her face. She looks mischievous. And that's what I like to think, her just driving with no license.
You never know your neighbors, especially if they were INESSA, Roman, and their daughters. INESSA, a kindergarten teacher, and Roman, a successful dentist. Together, INESSA's daughters from her first marriage, 25-year-old Victoria, and just shy of legal daughter Anastasia, are responsible for the violent deaths of at least 30 people across southern Russia. INESSA and her family were highly organized, using information from Roman's sister and brother-in-law who had police connections to organize their crimes around police activity. This is because INESSA liked to go after police officers, as one had left her for another woman in the past. And her current husband didn't feel like she was living in the past either? Okay, alright. Their victims weren't exclusively police officers, however. The family MO was breaking and entering the houses of sleeping families while they road tripped under the guise of going on monthly camping trips. One victim was a police officer named Ivan, who was killed when he attempted to stop members of the gang from fleeing the scene of the crime. Roman was eventually killed in a bloody standoff with police, and INESSA was arrested. A search of the family home uncovered a slew of weaponry, a complete arsenal. INESSA, Anastasia, and Victoria all confessed to their crimes, the 6-year reign ending. Vladimir Markin, the chief of Russia's equivalent to the FBI, said, "I'm sure that when they were together, one could hardly imagine that they could even plan a crime." It sounds so much more innocent than it is. The Bean Clan. Picturesque Scotland, a land of mystery and rolling dewy fields, glens, and hills that 100% have eyes. That's right, we're talking about the freaks who inspired the nauseating horror movie that we're never gonna forget anytime soon. Back in the 16th century, Alexander Bean and his partner, Black Agnes Douglas, set up home in a hidden sea cave and started popping out babies. Why? I don't know. Why a cave? Again, I don't know. Maybe they just wanted the saltiest and driest sinuses and intercourse ever. Well, the weirdos never left that cave, and they never let any of the kids leave it either. By keeping it in the family, the clan eventually grew to about 45 members, all starting from just the 2. Jobs were hard to come by when you're not part of society and potentially terrifying looking from inbreeding, so why not just murk and eat travelers whenever you're feeling peckish or want a new shirt? That's exactly what they did, operating only at night and retiring to their cave by day where they could enjoy a roasted meal of unfortunate victims and rest like weird hick vampires. Locals had no idea what was going on because they weren't being picked away at like croutons from the veggie tray, and the Bean clan survived doing this for 25 years, munching down on what's estimated to be about 1,000 people. Naturally, it eventually gets found out by the locals and they decide to do an old-fashioned mob style on this one. They descend on the cave and cut the off the men, followed by their hands and feet, leaving them to bleed to death. Everyone else was burnt alive. I'm sure if they could have, these weirdos would have attended their own massacre just to snack on their own cooking remains. And now the most dysfunctional family in history, the Ptolemies. The last dynasty of Greek Egypt. Their first 3 monarchs of the dynasty were capable, vigorous sorts that did things like build the great library at Alexandria on their weekends off. But from the 4th century forward, it was nightmarish. It's like they were on a game show where you tried to kill as many of your close relatives as you were able, preferably in as painful and public of a way as possible. This is complicated for 2 reasons. 1, they kept the names in the family. Men were always named Ptolemy, and women 9 times out of 10 were called Cleopatra. 2, they kept their seed in the family too, following the Egyptian tradition, brother and sister wed and had children. This means it's not easy to explain who is killing whom. What follows offered is a kind of prose poem compiled of examples dedicated to the most bestial family in history. Alright, so Ptolemy V was the nicest of the later Ptolemies and thoughtfully had his mother's killers ripped apart by a mob. Ptolemy VI fought his own brother for the throne and then married his sister Cleopatra II. Ptolemy IV kills his mom, who had killed her husband for having a love affair with her mother. Ptolemy VIII was a great enemy of Ptolemy VI and the probable killer of Ptolemy VII. He also married Cleopatra II and then began an affair with Cleopatra's daughter, Cleopatra III. So Ptolemy VIII had Ptolemy VI dismembered and the pieces sent to the mother, Cleopatra II. I could keep going, like for hours. They burned, cooked, eviscerated, literally anything you can think of, they did to one another. All of this comes down to the bottom of the family tree, Cleopatra VII, the daughter of Ptolemy XII, the famous Caesar-loving, Mark Antony-loving Cleopatra who blew Egypt out of the water. I need a water break after that.
Starting off this list, in our number 10 spot we have the Morgan family. The Morgan dynasty refers to a wealthy and influential American family that made its fortune in the banking industry. The family's patriarch, Junius Spencer Morgan, was born in 1813 and began his career as a banker in Boston. He later moved to London where he worked for the banking firm George Peabody & Co. and established his own firm, J.S. Morgan & Co. Junius Spencer Morgan's son, John Pierpont Morgan, also known as J.P. Morgan, became one of the most powerful financiers of all time. It is said that during the bank crisis in 1893, J.P. Morgan borrowed 100 tons of gold to the U.S. authorities, which is how he and his family would later go on to control the gold in the USA. He expanded the family's banking empire and played a major role in financing many of the largest industrial and infrastructure projects of the late 19th and early 20th centuries, including the creation of U.S. Steel, General Electric, and International Harvester. There are some pretty dark beliefs that some have about this family that ties to their involvement in both world wars, as well as the fact that members of the family played significant roles in the founding of the Federal Reserve System and the International Monetary Fund. The family's wealth and influence has allowed them to maintain close ties to the political and the social elite. Today the Morgans still own the biggest family reserve of gold, and rumor has it that it is connected by a tunnel with the New York branch of the US Central Bank. In our number 9 spot today we have the DuPont family. The DuPont family is a prominent family of French descent that has played a very significant role in the development of the United States since the late 18th century. The family has been involved in a variety of industries including chemicals, gunpowder, textiles, and agriculture. The DuPont family's story began with, the first DuPont, who was a French chemist who immigrated to the United States in 1800. He would later go on to found a chemical company that specialized in the production of gunpowder. The company's success helped to establish the DuPont family as one of the wealthiest and most powerful in the United States. These roots only grew deeper as the family allegedly ensured the US purchase of Louisiana from Napoleon in 1803. During During World War II, the family's chemical company played a very significant role in the Manhattan Project, which developed the very first atomic bomb. The family has also been involved in politics, with several members serving as governors, senators, and other elected officials. Some even believe that this family had the ability to influence US authorities so much that they might be responsible for the initial ban of the production of hemp and the ban on the devil's lettuce in order to protect the production of nylon, which was one of the most important products for the DuPont company. Today, the company is one of the biggest producers of GMO seeds, and they also have founded the Doomsday Treasury, where samples of all plants are held and preserved in the case of an apocalypse. In our number 8 spot today, we have the Rothschild family. The Rothschild dynasty is a very wealthy and influential family that gained prominence in the late 18th and early 19th centuries through their banking and financial activities. The family originated in Frankfurt, Germany, and its founder, Mayer Amschel Rothschild, began his banking career in the 1760s. Apparently, he sent 5 of his sons to financial centers so that the family could be involved in all of the most important places for world finances. The Rothschilds quickly became one of the most powerful banking families in Europe, with branches in major cities such as Paris, Vienna, and London. They financed governments, monarchs, and other wealthy individuals and played a very significant role in the economic and political affairs of many European countries. One of the most notable achievements of the family was their role in financing the British war effort against Napoleon Bonaparte in the early 19th century. The family used their vast network of agents and couriers to get information about the outcome of battles before anyone else, which allowed them to make informed decisions about investments. The Rothschilds also played a key role in the development of the modern banking system, including the establishment of the Bank of England and the introduction of the concept of a central bank. Today, the family remains one of the wealthiest and most influential in the world, with a net worth estimated at several billions of dollars, with some estimating that they manage trillions of dollars worth of money. Some even claim that the Rothschild family controls the world through the US Central Bank Federal Reserve. In our number 7 spot today, we have the Windsor family. The Windsor family is of course the current reigning royal family of the United Kingdom. The dynasty was established in 1970 when King George V changed the family name from Saxe-Coburg and Gotha to Windsor. The House of Saxe-Coburg and Gotha, which itself was a branch of the House of Wettin, was a prominent German dynasty. Queen Victoria married her first cousin, Prince Albert of Saxe-Coburg and Gotha, and their descendants went on to become the rulers of several European countries. Many of us are of course privy to the many royal scandals there have been over the years for the Windsors, whether that has to do with the current king and his late wife, the very unsettling Prince Andrew, or some of the ongoing situations with Harry and Meghan. The former monarch, Her Royal Highness Queen Elizabeth II, ascended the throne in 1952 following the death of her father, King George VI. She was the longest reigning monarch in British history and oversaw very significant changes to the role and responsibilities of the British monarchy during her reign. Of course, as a monarch, this family retains quite a bit of power, a whole pile of wealth, and they are still heavily influential. In our number 6 spot today, we have Don Carlos. This little troublemaker never made it to the title of king, but he sure was a little too close for comfort when you hear about the kinds of things he was doing. Carlos was the Prince of Asturias in the mid-1500s, as he was the eldest son of King Philip II of Spain. It is said that Carlos may have had some troubles right from birth, which many believe could be due to inbreeding that was common in the family at the time. Descriptions of his behaviors, though, are far worse than what anyone could have expected. It is said that Carlos did horrible things like hurting or taking the lives of animals for fun. Nowadays we call that a huge warning sign for potential killers. Back then it was like, I don't know. Was anybody even watching you, really? It is even said that at one point he purposefully blinded all of the horses in the royal stable. Soon, of course, his cruelties would extend to humans, with people claiming that one time he chose to harm a servant girl for no reason other than because he could. Major King Joffrey vibes in that one. And apparently one time he made a shoemaker eat a pair of shoes that he had made that the prince didn't like. He was just a little twerp. Carlos was set up by his family to marry the eldest daughter of King Henry II, but after a few hours with the man, she decided that there was absolutely no way in hell. Like, he was so bad that she would rather marry his dad. which she did in 1560. In the end, Carlos was found to be plotting to take out his own father, which landed him in prison in solitary confinement, where he passed away 6 months later. In our number 6 spot today, we have the Rockefeller family. The Rockefeller family is a very prominent American family that has played a very significant role in business, politics, philanthropy, and society for over a century. The family's wealth really started out with John D. Rockefeller, who founded the Standard Oil Company in the late 19th century and became one of the richest men in history. John actually had a major impact on the American economy, transforming the oil industry and creating a very vast empire that completely dominated the market. His business practices, including aggressive competition and horizontal integration, drew both admiration as well as criticism. The Rockefellers also had a hand in helping the construction of the United Nations, and they also founded Bilderberg, which is where the most powerful people in the world meet up. Other notable members of the Rockefeller family include Nelson Rockefeller, who served as governor of New York and vice president of the United States, and David Rockefeller, who was a very prominent banker and philanthropist. The family continues to be involved in various industries and philanthropic activities, with some estimates suggesting that their combined wealth is in the billions of dollars. Some out there also believe that the Rockefeller family now controls things, but in secret, through oil companies like ExxonMobil and BP, as well as through banks like Chase Manhattan Bank. In our number 4 spot today, we have the House of Saud. The House of Saud is the ruling royal family of Saudi Arabia, and they have been in power since the country was founded in 1932. Over the years, the House of Saud has maintained its grip on power through a combination of political alliances, military force, and religious legitimacy. The family has also been able to leverage its vast oil wealth to consolidate its power both domestically and internationally. When the vast oil resources hidden in Saudi Arabia were found, it not only completely changed the economy of the nation, but it also catapulted the House of Saud into the world of richest families ever. The current king of Saudi Arabia is King Salman, who ascended to the throne in 2015 following the death of his half-brother King Abdullah. The current king's son, Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman, is widely regarded as the de facto ruler of the country. Of course, because of their mass amount of wealth and their current political position, it is no wonder this royal family remains on the list of powerful families in the world. In our number 3 spot today, we have the Bush family. The Bush family is a very prominent American political family that has produced 2 US presidents, several other notable politicians, and successful business people. The story of the Bush dynasty really starts off with Prescott Sheldon Bush, who was a successful businessman and US senator from Connecticut. Allegedly, he became a member of a group called Skull and Bones and apparently was behind the failed military coup in 1933, which was aimed at taking power away from Franklin Roosevelt. During the Second World War, he was also the head of the Union Banking Corporation. This is all fine and well until the bank was impounded due to their connections with, well, you know who, the evil head of the Second World War. The Bush legacy continued on with his son, George H.W. Bush, who served as vice president under Ronald Reagan and was later elected president in 1988. George H.W. Bush's son, George W. Bush, served as governor of Texas and was also elected president, serving from 2001 to 2009. For people around my age, this is probably the most well-known member of the Bush family, and that is due to the multiple scandals surrounding his presidency, which would include the Iraq War as well as the response to Hurricane Katrina. Other notable members of the Bush family include Jeb Bush, another son of George H.W., who served as governor of Florida and ran unsuccessfully for president in 2016, as well as Neil Bush, who is also a businessman. Overall, the Bush family has had a significant impact on American politics and public life, and their legacy continues to be felt today. In our number 2 spot today, we have the Koch family. The legacy of the Koch family dynasty really all starts back with the founding of the Koch Company. The company was founded by Fred C. Koch in 1940 and was later taken over by his sons Charles and David, who transformed it into a major conglomerate. Today, Koch Industries generates billions of dollars in revenue and employs tens of thousands of people around the world. The Koch brothers were also known for their significant involvement in conservative politics and advocacy. They were major donors to a variety of causes and organizations that promoted limited government, government, free markets, and individual liberty. The brothers also founded and supported a number of think tanks and political organizations, including the Cato Institute, Americans for Prosperity, and the Charles Cook Foundation, of course. David Cook did pass away a few years ago in 2019, but Charles is still involved, and Cook Industries is said to bring in over $1 trillion in annual revenue, which makes it one of the largest private firms in America. Some speculate that this mass fortune is sometimes used to assist in having a hand in political influence. In our number 1 spot today, we have the Rothschilds. This family is easily one of the most, if not the most, powerful family in the modern era. In fact, it is said that most of us in the Western world don't even realize the impact this family has had on our lives, as our consumer-driven lifestyle is definitely directly related to the monetary systems this family put in place. This would include the United States Federal Reserve. Because of this insane amount of money and power that this family has held for over a century, there are plenty of conspiracy theories going on surrounding them. The conspiracies run deep, and they go quite dark. They touch on everything from assassination attempts, some successfully completed on sitting presidents, to heinous World War II agendas that would have benefited the family. Of course, they are conspiracies, so no one is quite sure which of these secrets, if any, are true. Even still, the stories and speculations swirl today, waiting for some piece of evidence to maybe bring them to light. Starting off this list in our number 10 spot, we have the Kensington system. Queen Victoria's reign began in 1837, and it lasted up until her death in 1901. She was just 18 years old when she found herself on the throne, and it was all by chance, as she was actually 5th in line when she was born. This is all stressful enough, but certainly one of the worst parts of her upbringing was being brought up under the Kensington system. This basically all started when her mother, Duchess Victoria of Kent, created this system in order to control her daughter, literally just isolated her away from all of her friends and even from other family members, and apparently this was done to keep her quote-unquote pure. The Duchess would monitor her every move, she would decide who she could see and who she could speak to, and Victoria only had 2 friends she could play with growing up, one being her half-sister and the other being her mother's attendant, Sir John Conroy. Victoria was even forced to share a room with her mother until she was queen. She couldn't even walk down the hall by herself. In the end, Victoria placed a lot of blame on John Conroy for manipulating her mother. She even called him the demon incarnate. In our number 9 spot today, we have the royal affairs. There have been many rumors over the years about the royal family and their extramarital affairs. Okay, I'm not saying it's a tradition, but it happens a lot, and I'm saying this goes way back. So far back that one of the first accusations of this within the royal family dates all the way back to Henry VIII and Anne Boleyn. Since then, it has only continued with people such as Princess Margaret and Peter Townsend, Princess Anne and Commander Timothy Lawrence, and of course King Charles and Queen Consort Camilla, just to name a few. The latter of those definitely being the most famous, especially when the now king was confronted about it by his wife at the time, the beloved Princess Diana. Apparently, King Charles responded to the confrontation by saying, quote, "Well, I refuse to be the only Prince of Wales who never had a mistress." Maybe not the attitude to keep when you're speaking to your wife, who you're cheating on. I don't know. Guess I'm just not royal enough to get it. In our number 8 spot today, we have pets. As we all know very well, image is everything for the royal family, and that is down to the finest, smallest detail, including pets. It is well known that the Queen absolutely loved corgis, and how could we possibly blame her? Apparently, however, if a dog is not a corgi or a Labrador, it is socially looked down upon. Can't describe how insane that is. They're dogs! If you brought a dog who had just been rolling around in the mud everywhere with you, I could see why that wouldn't be as widely accepted among fancy social circles, but only giving the choice of a few random breeds seems kind of ridiculous. Apparently, Meghan Markle actually had to give up her beagle named Guy a few years ago before she joined the family, and then left it. I guess she can probably have whatever dog she wants now, so there's always an upside. In our number 7 spot today, we have King Charles I. Okay, this is one that goes way back and it really creeps me out. So King Charles I, right now we're on the 3rd, so we're taking it a couple back. King Charles I was tried for treason after the Civil War, and he ended up being beheaded in 1649. I guess in the 1600s everyone was beheaded, so this wasn't necessarily abnormal, which is certainly weird, but that's a history lesson for another day. The weird part of this, however, is that apparently his head was sewn back on his body so that he could sit for a portrait, or it was perhaps supposed to be a sign of respect. Either way, it's very weird and very gross. I feel terrible for whoever's job it was to do that, and I also feel bad for the artist who was forced to paint that. Talk about traumatic. It does certainly make sense though that people say that Charles' ghost still haunts a building because there is no amount of haunting that could make up for being beheaded and then having your head sewn back onto your body. Okay, why'd we do the first part if we were gonna do the second? Could've just cut the middleman, you know? But instead, they cut his head off, okay? In our number 6 spot today, we have never travel in pairs. This is one travel rule that certainly makes sense, but it is really dark when you think about it. This rule is one that the British royal family, and honestly many people who can afford this sort of luxury safety, do nowadays. This tradition and rule is one that means that any heirs to the throne are not allowed to travel together. This is of course in case some sort of accident happens. Not every heir to the throne would be injured or perhaps killed. It's definitely very smart and sensible, but it has got to be grim, just constantly preparing for the worst thing to happen. It is of the utmost importance to the royal family that they preserve the line to the throne. Like I mentioned before, however, other people are now taking a page out of the royal book and are using this travel rule where possible. In our number 5 spot today, we have the black outfit. Another travel rule that the royal family must follow is in regards to an item that they have to bring with them on all trips, whether business or pleasure. It is pretty unusual to see the royal family dressed in black, despite when a specific occasion calls for it, but every time they travel, they're required to bring an all-black outfit with them. This is to prepare for the worst case scenario. If they are away on a trip and somebody important to them passes away, they need to ensure that they are ready with the appropriate clothing for when they're able to touch down on their home soil. This is of course very practical, but it's definitely kind of morbid. I mean, you're having to fuss over what you're gonna wear when you're actually just mourning the loss of someone close to you. It certainly wouldn't be the top of my list of things to focus on, but maybe that's why I'm not cut out for royalty. Okay.
One of the few mafiastos to be executed is Louis Lepke Buccialter. Nicknamed Lepkele, Little Louis in Yiddish, then shortened to Lepke, this crime boss was a quiet man for years, managed to avoid public spotlight. In conversations with criminal associates, Lepke preferred listening over talking. He was an overall nice man, appreciated by the community for how he aided his neighbors. He generously compensated his crew members and took them to hockey games, boxing matches, and even winter cruises. He married a widower named Betty and adopted Betty's child from the previous marriage. In the early 1930s, Lepke created an effective process of performing contract killings for the Cosa Nostra mobsters. It had no name, but the press 10 years later called it Murder Inc. The Cosa Nostra mobsters wanted to insulate themselves from any connection to these killings. So Lepke's partner would relay the contract request from the Costra to Lepke, who would assign it to a street member who had no connections with any major crime family. If they were caught, they could not implicate the Costra members in the crime. They were soon completing jobs all over the country for their mobster bosses, grossing over $1 million in profit per year. Ultimately, Lepke is cornered and forced to surrender after 3 years of hiding when the killing of Joseph Rosen, an informant, goes awry. He's tried for the killing of Rosen alongside 3 other murders, and Lepke is found guilty and sentenced to death. He exhausts his 4 appeals, but is executed by electric chair in 1944. In our number 3 spot today, we have the armed forces. This is a tradition or system that comes into play when a new monarch comes into power. So last year this happened with the king after the passing of the queen. It is definitely one of the most intimidating parts of his new role, and this is that King Charles now becomes the head of the armed forces. This means that it is his responsibility, and he is the only person who can declare when the country is at war and when the war is over. Of course, he won't be doing this entirely alone. He needs to follow the advice and guidance of the government. The perhaps good news is that the new king has held quite close ties to the armed forces throughout his life, even spending time in the Royal Navy and taking flying instruction from the Royal Air Force during his 2nd year at Cambridge University. Of course, the hope is that he won't have to be in a position to make these difficult decisions, but when or if he's faced with them, we can hope he makes the proper decisions for the country. In our number 2 spot today, we have King Rudolph II. We'll do a little palate cleanser before we finish off out with big bad number 1. King Rudolph II, the Holy Roman Emperor in 1552. He was known as a collector of sorts. Some royals collect stamps, others collect zoo animals.
Okay. His home was dangerous, to say the least. His castle was home to lions, tigers, and orangutans, so good luck getting 8 hours of sleep. Not gonna happen. He also liked to collect human artifacts. That one's a little bit more jarring than the zoo animals, right? I mean literally, King Rudolph II had random bones and body parts in jars, all in the name of science. Watch out for the animal droppings and the jars of teeth. Welcome home. King Rudolph II is of course quite important in history as he supported the scientific revolution quite a bit, hence the jars. You know, he also poured tons of money into astrology. He's into the cosmos and the kidneys. What a guy, alright? It's got a lot of interests. In our number 1 spot today we have Paul Bernardo and Carla Homolka. We'll end on our least favorite Canadian couple, Paul Bernardo and Carla Homolka. They committed a series of brutal assaults and killings in the late 1980s and early 1990s. Their victims included Homolka's sister as well as several other young women. Absolutely disgusting. Bernardo was known for his inhumane acts in Scarborough. He even had a nasty nickname for them before his true, even more disgusting identity was revealed. The couple has since been dubbed the Ken and Barbie killers due to their wonder-bread appearance. Homolka had made a plea with prosecutors testifying against Bernardo in exchange for a reduced sentence. Meanwhile, Bernardo was eventually convicted of several charges and was sentenced to life imprisonment without the possibility of parole. #ByKen.